Welcome to Money Moves. Today we're diving into something that impacts all of us, how politics shapes your financial life. We're talking about interest rates, inflation, minimum wage, global trade, and even what the Federal Reserve is doing behind the scenes. By the end of this video, you'll understand how political decisions, from Washington to Sacramento, impact your wallet and the prices you see every day. Let's jump in. Let's start with interest rates. These rates determine how much it costs to borrow money for things like homes, cars, and credit cards. Real-life example. In 2020, during the pandemic, interest rates were near 0% to stimulate the economy. You could get a 30-year mortgage at around 2.75%. That meant a $500,000 home in California had a monthly payment of about $2,041, excluding taxes and insurance. Fast forward to 2024. Rates are now above 7%, so that same house costs over $3,327 per month. That's an extra $1,286 monthly just in interest payments. Why the jump? The Federal Reserve raised rates to fight inflation, which got out of control after government stimulus checks and increased consumer spending during the pandemic. Political decisions like approving stimulus packages created short-term relief, but also contributed to long-term inflation pressures. Inflation happens when prices go up and your money buys less. It's been a hot topic recently because prices for essentials, like food, gas, and housing, have skyrocketed. Real-life examples. Eggs in 2021, a dozen cost about $2. By early 2023, they were selling for nearly $8 due to supply chain issues and inflation. Gas in California, gas prices hit $6 per gallon in 2022, driven by global oil disruptions, California's stricter emissions regulations, and taxes. How does this connect to politics? During the pandemic, the government pumped trillions of dollars into the economy through stimulus checks and loans. This increased the money supply and demand for goods. However, supply chains were disrupted, and businesses couldn't keep up, driving prices higher. In California, policies like cap-and-trade programs and stricter environmental regulations make gas and energy more expensive than in other states. Takeaway inflation means your savings lose value over time, and fixed-income households feel the pinch the most. California recently raised its minimum wage to $16 per hour, one of the highest in the entire nation. While this helps workers keep up with the high cost of living, it also has some unintended consequences. Real-life example. A local coffee shop in San Diego increased menu prices by 15% after the wage hike to cover labor costs. A $4 latte now costs $4.60. A small grocery store owner in Sacramento had to cut hours for employees because they couldn't afford the higher payroll. Pros of raising the minimum wage: workers have more money to spend, boosting the local economy significantly. It reduces poverty levels, especially in high-cost states like California. Cons: businesses pass the extra costs on to consumers, which contributes to inflation. Small businesses struggle to compete, potentially leading to layoffs or closures. Takeaway. While raising the minimum wage helps workers immediately, it can fuel higher prices, making goods and services more expensive for everyone. It's a delicate balance between giving people more spending power and keeping inflation under control. In California, the cost of living is among the highest in the entire United States. This isn't just about wages, it's about the policies that influence housing, energy, and transportation costs significantly. Let's dive into some real-life examples to understand better. Housing: California has strict zoning laws and environmental regulations, which limit the construction of new homes. This keeps supply low while demand is high, driving rents through the roof. In Los Angeles, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is over $2,500 per month. Utilities. Policies supporting renewable energy are great for the environment, but they also lead to higher energy costs. In 2023, Californians paid an average of 20.45 cents per kilowatt hour, compared to the national average of 13.72 cents. Gas taxes and emissions regulations add about $1.50 per gallon compared to other states, making commuting more expensive. Policies aimed at long-term goals like sustainability can increase short-term costs for everyday Californians. While these policies may be necessary, they require careful planning to avoid overburdening families. When the United States imposes sanctions on other countries, it often affects us here at home. Let's look at a real-life example. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the United States imposed sanctions that restricted Russian oil exports. Although the United States doesn't heavily rely on Russian oil, the global market tightened, causing gas prices to surge. This hit Californians especially hard, with gas prices peaking at over $6 per gallon in 2022. Trade restrictions on China have made goods like electronics, clothing, and appliances more expensive due to disrupted supply chains and higher tariffs. Pros of sanctions include putting economic pressure on foreign governments to change behavior without military intervention and protecting national security by limiting trade with hostile nations. However, they often result in higher costs for American consumers and can strain relationships with allies who are also impacted by supply chain disruptions. While sanctions serve strategic goals, they can create short-term pain for American families by driving up prices for essential goods. One common question is, why don't we just make everything here in the United States? It sounds great, but it's not that simple or straightforward. Let's consider a real-life example to understand better. The iPhone Apple assembles most iPhones in China because labor and production costs are significantly lower there. If the iPhone were made entirely in the United States, it could cost over $2,000 compared to its current price of about $1,000. Textiles. The average t-shirt sold in the United States is made in countries like Vietnam or Bangladesh because wages there are a fraction of US wages. If those shirts were made here, they could cost $30 instead of $10, making them much more expensive. Pros of making everything in the United States include more American jobs and less dependence on foreign nations, as well as higher product quality and stricter environmental standards. However, this would also mean significantly higher prices for goods, impacting consumers, and potential retaliation from other countries, hurting exports and global trade relationships. Bringing production home would create jobs but also drive up costs for the average American. The key is finding a balance through strategic and well-thought-out policies. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency, meaning most international trade is conducted in dollars. This gives the US enormous power, but it also comes with risks. A real-life example is oil. Global oil is priced in dollars, so countries need US currency to buy it. This strengthens the dollar and keeps borrowing costs low. Another example is imports. Because the dollar is strong, Americans enjoy cheaper prices for imported goods like electronics, cars, and clothing. However, countries like China and Russia, through groups like BRICS, are pushing to trade in their own currencies to reduce reliance on the dollar. If they succeed, the US could lose its financial dominance. The takeaway here is that the dollar's role as the global currency gives us economic power, but it's not guaranteed forever. If other countries shift away, it could weaken our economy. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is a coalition of emerging economies challenging the dominance of the US dollar. Real-life example. BRICS countries are developing a new currency system to trade with each other, bypassing the dollar. This could reduce demand for the dollar, leading to a weaker currency and higher costs for imports in the US. Pros of BRICS for member countries. Less reliance on the dollar shields them from US sanctions. It strengthens their regional economies. Cons for the US, weakens the dollar's influence globally, makes imports more expensive, raising costs for American consumers. The Federal Reserve, or Fed, is like the economy's traffic cop. It manages the money supply and interest rates to keep inflation and unemployment in check. Real-life example. In 2022, inflation hit a 40-year high, so the Fed raised interest rates aggressively to cool down spending. This slowed the housing market and made borrowing more expensive but helped bring inflation down. When rates were near zero during the pandemic, it encouraged spending and borrowing but also contributed to inflation later. Takeaway. While the Fed operates independently, its decisions are shaped by the broader political and economic landscape. Politics impacts every corner of your financial life, from the cost of gas in California to the price of your groceries and the strength of your paycheck. Policies around interest rates, minimum wage, global trade, and inflation ripple through the economy, shaping the cost of living for everyone. Here's the big takeaway. Understanding these connections empowers you to make smarter financial decisions. Whether it's voting for policies that align with your goals, budgeting for inflation, or planning for economic shifts, knowledge is your best tool. That's a wrap for today's episode of Money Moves. If this video helped you understand the big picture of how politics affects your wallet, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more you know, the better money moves you can make. See you next time.